Let's talk about creating a test plan. Boy, you really want to talk premature. We'll talk about this. We'll take a break. We'll do readings when we come back for both the second half of Peopleware and the Webster 5 readings. We'll start with Webster 5. Peopleware, I'm going to go through a few of the highlights. Again, this is reading you've got. I don't need to regurgitate it to you. I'll throw in what I consider relevant. This is the thing that's really important. They wander a bit in the second half of the book, as you probably discovered reading it. And then you'll need to start reading Facts and Fallacies, chapters 1 and 2 for this coming week, which is a lot, but that's an excellent book. And let me just tell you as I sit here, there are only a few things in that whole book where I disagree with Robert Glass. Other than that, most of what he says is like, yeah, he's telling you the truth. So these are things that you need to believe before you get out in the real world. So a lot of you have been out in the real world, you read it and say, yeah, that's what's happening at work. Okay, software quality assurance. Okay, as you know, because I've said this any number of times, this is one of my pet peeves. Software quality assurance is the downfall of the IT industry. It's not given the time, it's not given the money, it's not given the focus it should. And we produce a lot of crappy product as a result. And this has been going on for decades, all the way back in the 70s. I think it was Jerry Weinberg who said that if we built buildings the way that we program software, the first woodpecker who came along would destroy civilization. It is really appalling and I just had this conversation, I think I mentioned last week, I had dinner with my daughter and son-in-law, and he works in QA for a software company up at Point of the Mountain, and was just shaking his head. He was like, they don't pay any time or attention to this. That's one where I told you they only wanted him to test the happy path. Does it work if the user does exactly what the worker is supposed to do? If so, then consider it passed. Don't test any of the things that the user do. Don't test any of the things that the user might do that's wrong. I wish I knew what that noise was. It sounds like someone sharpening a pencil.
It's the sound of an aging building, Don.
Yes. Sign an agent. I am moving back to the Talmadge building next semester. We will have a whole lecture. Well, core quality values in software. These are things to consider when doing a commercial or actually simply production level software. Reliability. Do you have unacceptable errors or unacceptable downtime? Performance. Can it actually get the work done in the time allotted? A software project I reviewed many years ago was a re-engineering of credit card processing software that was running on Burroughs mainframes. And they were doing the development in-house. I'd been brought in to review the project. This is what I was brought in to review 3 times. And the data, who knows what EBCDIC is?
Time.
EBCDIC is what ASCII was before there was ASCII. EBCDIC was the character coding for IBM and other mainframes that ASCII ended up replacing. So they had these mainframes that they were still using software in the mainframes, and it was producing the credit card transaction data all coded in EBCDIC. And this company was bringing it in to a Unix server and converting it to ASCII, and then processing and converting it back to EBCDIC and sending it back out. Well, with the business requirements is they would have to process all their credit card transactions. They'd have to handle them in a 2-hour period each night. They were 1,000 times too slow in doing it. The upshot is one of our consultants of the company I was working for sat down and wrote a 10-line C program they were using distributed objects to do the conversion. And Rocky, this architect, just sort of put his face in his hands, and he sat down and wrote a 10-line C program with a lookup table to convert between EBCDIC and ASCII back, and sped it up by 2 factors of magnitude. Said you're still 10 times too slow, but at least you're only 10 times too slow instead of 1,000 times too slow. You have to find the rest somewhere else. Functionality, it has to offer sufficient usable features. Compatibility, it has to play nice in whatever environment it's in. The operating system, other services it has to talk to, whether that's within the company, whether that's within the ecosystem, the platform you're deploying to, and so on. Lifespan. Will anyone still want this product 6 months from now? There's an awful lot of apps on the App Store that sort of, had a lifespan of about 30 days. And they're now buried in the, how many apps are there in Google Play and App Store? Yeah, gazillion. That's a good technical term. And not only will it continue to grow and develop, will it continue to be relevant. Let me ask you, how many apps do most of you have on your smartphones? Good man. I've got my front page apps, and then I have all these folders filled with apps. How many apps do you actually use on your smartphone on a regular basis?
About 6.
About 6 for me. Maybe, actually, there's probably 10 that I cycle through within a week. I probably have 10 times that number, yes.
I tried the delete all the apps that you aren't using on your smartphone, and then I found I was constantly downloading apps because I needed them in one instance.
In one instance, yeah.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Which I've been through that a few times, which is why now I simply put them all in folders. And every now and then it's like, wait, isn't there an app for that? Look, there it is. Also, I'll go search for an app to do something, and the App Store will tell me, oh, you already have that on your phone.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, I do. Yes.
So I've heard some people describe that as an anti-pattern, just like the explosion of apps. Would you agree with that?
Well, describe what is an anti-pattern mean. Yes, there are anti-patterns.
We're going to take this website and we're going to squeeze it onto your phone in something that takes up space.
Yes.
Is there a fix for it?
Something else.
Okay.
Deployment. You have to be able to deliver, deploy, and have the client make use of the system in a sufficient time frame. Support. You have to be able to upgrade and repair it over time. And as Glass will point out, 2/3 of computer maintenance is spent adding new features. Only 1/3 is spent fixing bugs. Cost. It actually has to give you a return on investment. Do you have any idea what some of the leading games cost now to bring to market?
$13 million.
Yeah, there are some that have been $100 million. I mean, they rival movie budgets, and a lot of them rival movie income as well. But a lot of game companies, have you ever noticed there's this steady stream of game companies going out of business? Even though they make great games. In many cases, it's because it took a lot of money and time and effort to get this game to market and make a great game, and the game's actual return on investment isn't enough to keep everyone employed going forward. So we're going to have, I notice the black lines don't show up. You can see them faintly. We'll have a whole lecture on this diagram, but the basic idea is that quality assurance needs to touch every part of the software lifecycle. It's not 3 weeks of testing at the end. It's picking the right methodology, devising guidelines and standards, having the right expertise in-house, what your company's key values are, doing metrics, reviews, and testing for evaluation, keeping things in a configuration management system, managing your defects and features, and improving your process. Trust me, most organizations do not approach SQA this way. And we just talked about that. There are lots of types of testing. There are more than I have listed here. And again, there is a lot of inadequate testing that goes on in the software industry. One of the big ones here is regression testing. You want regression testing to be as automated as possible because there are different figures floating around. I think Glass quotes one of maybe 15%, or that may simply be the one I've heard elsewhere, that every time you go in to fix a bug, you have a 15% chance of introducing a new one. So, what I want from your test plan. What I want you to do this week is to take everything you've done today, particularly your requirements and your architecture and design document, and establish what your acceptance standards are for your minimum viable product in terms of reliability, performance, and functionality, and how you're going to test for those. Some of you already had that. I think the Tower VR, you said you must get, what, 90 frames per second?
Yes.
In order to avoid users
Motion
throwing up.
sickness.
So, based on those, then decide, and again, you've got a week to do your first draft. I'm not expecting something, I shouldn't lower expectations too much, but I want you to indicate what tests are going to be done or are being done. Especially interested if you have any test frameworks that you're making use of right now, so you have automatic checks on builds. You should indicate for your areas of testing what constitutes success. Again, this may need to be high level at this point. You know, Tower VR, we need to achieve 90 frames per second. Here's how we'll test it. You know, we've got a little meter there is actually checking the frame rate and so on. And as we test this is how we'll track it. Your test plan should include some form of user acceptance testing. Hey there.
Hi.
You're in luck, we haven't called roll yet.
All right.
Anyway. Which is, when do you actually put this in front of people other than yourselves? And have them tell you what they think of it. That can be a challenge given the environment, the short time frame, but it's essential. One of the words of wisdom I learned is that beta, and this comes back to Pages, because we had some beta testers who loved the product, and we started shipping the product, and we had people who started saying, you know, why doesn't this have WordPerfect key bindings? Emacs key bindings. You know, why isn't there a ruler here, and so on. And Larry Spellhog, our CEO, turned to me and said, you know, beta testers are not the same as end users. It's a good thing to take what you've got and put it in front of someone who has not used it previously, and see how they react. Make sure your whole team is giving feedback. Your first draft is due by Saturday. This is going to be revised as you go along. But lay out what your test plan is, specific again to what your requirements, design and architecture are. How are you going to, the phrase they love in computer science is validate and verify. Are you going to validate and verify what you've got? Yes?
Would you recommend watching the testing podcasts this week?
The podcast,
I know that one has a lot on it.
it could actually be very useful. At the very least, have someone on your team watch it. You know, say, okay, you're doing QA, you watch this podcast, and you come back and work with us on doing this. If you all want to watch it, that's fine. It's your podcast for the week. I don't remember offhand how long that one is.
It's about 3:17.
3 minutes and 17 seconds?
3 hours and 17
Oh,
minutes.
then I would have one person watch it.
Yeah.
And leave me a note, but if you have one person assigned to watch it, let me know, and you can count that towards your billable hours, because that's far too long a podcast.
Yeah.
I will be reviewing all these over. Any other questions here? Now, do you want to take a break when everyone else is out in the hallway, or do you want me to go for another 10 minutes?
Give us 10 minutes.
Okay. In that case, let's go to Webster 5. There we go. Which I think is just 3 articles. Thermocline of truth. This is something, this concept first occurred to me oh, yes.
Will the Webster readings also be citable
Yes.
for a test?
Webster readings are citable. My slides, my lecture slides are citable. In some cases, if you simply say, Professor Webster kept saying this in class, I'll say, yeah, I did, that's fine. That's citable too. I've had that in answers, like, yes, I did, I said this probably too many times. But yes, the Webster readings are very citable, and in fact, there's one set of Webster readings which you're not required to read before the midterm. It's, I think, Webster 7, which are all the pitfalls, which are eminently useful. So I, at the very least, go look at the Webster 7 readings before the midterm, and then have those handy when you do the midterm, because there'll be a lot of cases you can just read down. This is what it looks like. Let me show you. I wrote a book 20 years ago called Pitfalls of Object-Oriented Development. And I have been threatening to write a book and never have finished it. Oops, that's video lectures. Oh, come on. Can I hit anything but readings? Okay. Yes. I'm threatening to make this a book. These are the Webster 7 readings. All of these are pretty short. They all follow the same format. They all look like this. Introduction, symptoms, consequences, detection, extraction, prevention. But if you simply look at the titles here, trust me, there will be midterm questions where you can just call up this page and say, oh, look, betting the company on a given technology or methodology. You go look at it and say, yeah, that's it. And you go, bam, got a citation. So, again, my intent here is not how much you memorize, though the more you know and remember this, the faster you get through the midterm. It is to know that these problems exist, are universal, and are documented. Whether that's in the 3 books you've read, whether it's in Armor, whether it's in my various posts. Because this is all based on stuff that I have seen in real life. Okay, back to the thermocline. What's a thermocline? Who can tell me? Oh, come on, you all read the article. Yes?
It's like the temperature difference in water depth, where,
It changes temperature abruptly.
yeah, really.
How many of you have ever swum in a lake?
Yes.
Okay? You know how there's about a foot of warm water, and then you stick your foot below that, and it's suddenly like ice cold?
Yeah.
That's a thermocline. It also happens in the ocean, but it's a little more gradual, but it's very real there too. And I first thought of this, I was working at Apple doing contract programming. It was back in end of 88, start of 89. And my observation, this is during the time that Steve Jobs was gone. He was over at Next. He founded Next, he owned Next, anyway. But what I observed during my 3 or 4 months there is that there was this upper management layer at Apple, and then there were all the workers, and there was this barrier. And basically, stuff drifted down from upper management, but none of the complaints or bad news ever got back up there. And what I discovered when I started, several years later, started getting into failed projects, I found this was a typical symptom of failed projects. When I'm called into a corporation to review a troubled project, I spend my first week or 2 simply talking to people, and I always start with people in the trenches. And what I find is that the actual developers working down there, if I say, what are the problems here? They'll say, well, it's this, this, and this. And a few will have access to grind, but after I've talked to a dozen of them, I know pretty much exactly what's going on that's wrong. Then I talked to the middle management, said, oh yeah, you know, we got a few problems, but it's fine. And I talked to upper management, said, oh no, the project's on track. It's like, well, do you know that you're actually, people in the trenches are saying, this project will never ship on time? And they're like, what? And you know, sometimes they believe me, and sometimes they thank me and pat me on the head and give me a check and send me on their way, and then the project fails. I had one project I reviewed 3 times with increasingly negative feedback to upper management, and they ignored me all 3 times, and then a year after the 3rd one, the project was canceled and the senior VP was fired. Yeah.
So like, I get the feeling that the managers aren't the ones that want you there. Who brings you on?
Well, usually it's upper management that brings me on because, you know, and often their idea is, well, you know, we want to get this project done. What do we need to do to get it done? And then I tell them, well, you know, you've got some fundamental problems here. You have really bad code. You have bad architecture. If you have architecture, you know, at all, you have no QA and so on. They're like, oh, okay, thank you. The door's that way. Because they were hoping that I would say, well, do this, this, and this, and you'll ship in 3 weeks. And that is seldom what I end up saying to them. So, thermocline of truth, as I call it, is this barrier that often exists. And the interesting thing that happens is the closer you get to deadline, it starts moving up towards upper management. Because it becomes harder and harder in the middle management area to deny how bad things are. And this is, in my opinion, the source of the syndrome that Brooks talks about. How often projects slip 3 weeks before the ship date. That's the point at which the thermocline has now moved all the way up to the surface. My favorite story on it, I got dragged into Y2K remediation at Fannie Mae. And the Fannie Mae vice president, who was basically given the task, I was working with her on object stuff, and she got the Y2K, and she basically said, misery loves company, Webster, you're doing this with me. So I spent 1.5 years doing that. And they were supposed to have all the remediation done, all the fixes done to all the systems that needed remediation for the Y2K problem by the end of '98. And there were like 14 divisions that had to do this, separate divisions. And she would meet with him every week, with the top managers of these 14 divisions every week, and they would have a green, yellow, red status as to how they were doing. And all through the second half of '98, she was getting greens, occasional yellows, and so on. First week in December, 3 weeks before they're supposed to be done, she has a meeting, and all of a sudden all the reports are yellow and red. And she pretty much suspected that was happening anyway. But her comment was great. She looked around, and all these people, a lot of whom who outranked her technically at Fannie Mae, she looked around and said, explain to me what you know now that you didn't know a week ago. And that's the core problem. Upper management often actively discourages bad news. There's a management style that's, you know, don't give me problems, give me solutions. Like, well, no, we actually have problems, and we've suggested solutions. You say we can't afford that, or, you know, it has to ship by this date. So, what you need is honesty and a management, a company culture that rewards that honesty. You need to break through that thermocline by, you know, engineers being able to contact upper management and say, we have serious problems, these are the problems, and for upper management not to punish that individual with the honest feedback. Or for that matter, any managers along the way. But simply say, what can we do to fix this, and what's a realistic estimate for getting this done? There are organizations that do that, and there are organizations that actually successfully ship software more or less on time. But this is, I did a post about the Air Force. The Air Force has some insane number of accounting systems, like 75 accounting systems within the U.S. Air Force. They're not compatible more or less with each other. The Air Force has not been able to close or balance its